You think you are SOC 2 compliant because you are running in Azure. You are not. And I need to be very direct about this. Because I've seen multiple organizations make this assumption that if they're using Azure, which is already SOC 2 compliant, that makes them automatically SOC 2 compliant. And then they scramble when the enterprise customer asks for their SOC 2 report, which they don't have one. Microsoft has a SOC 2 report. That's great, which covers their data centers, their hypervisor, and their physical security. It does not cover how you configure the cloud resources, and it does not cover your access control, your policy, your RBAC, and your incident response plan. That's all on you. In this video, I'm gonna break down exactly what SOC 2 compliance is, especially when you're running in Azure, what Microsoft handles, what you're responsible for, and specific Azure tools that you need to configure actually meet the requirement. And make sure to watch till the end because I'm going to share the biggest mistake I see organizations make that adds up to 6 months to their SOC compliance process. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and come join my learning community. Let me give you a bit of a context. I have helped multiple organizations get the SOC 2 compliance reports and configure the tools in place for them to have the visibility not just once but over time. And pattern is almost always same. The CEO or the CTO hears the word SOC 2 from one of their customers, thinks that they're using Azure, which is already SOC 2 compliant, so that probably makes them SOC 2 compliant as well. And then a big customer shows up and then ask for the reports, and then suddenly the SOC 2 reports become a fire drill. I had exactly the same call last month. Potential client moving to Azure and asking the same question, Azure is SOC 2, are we okay with the SOC? And I had to tell them no and explain how it works. And honestly, if somebody is telling you otherwise, either they don't understand the SOC 2 or they don't understand the shared responsibility model, or both. Alright, let me clear up the confusions first. SOC 2 stands for Service Organization Control 2. It's an auditing framework by AICPA and it's designed for service organizations who manage customer data in one way or other. If you're a SaaS company, MSP, or a consulting firm that touches client data at any given time, your customer is probably going to ask you for it. Now, here's where most people get this wrong. SOC 2 is not a certificate. And I see a lot of LinkedIn posts of people saying, we are SOC 2 compliant, this is our certificate. That's not a thing. What you actually get is SOC 2 attestation report, which is just a snapshot at a given time when you were audited. It's a report that tells that an external auditor came to your company, review all your checks and policies in place, and that too over a period of time, and documented what they found. It's basically an audit report. It's not a badge. The framework itself is built on 5 trust service criteria. The security is one of the main and the biggest one, and it's not optional. The other 4, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. These 4 are optional, and then you include one based on what your customer actually cares about. And there are 2 types of report. The report 1 says your controls were designed properly at a single point of time. The report 2, which is what every serious customer is going to see, says that your controls were operational over the time period of 6 to 12 months. There's a big difference. Snap type 1 is a snapshot, and type 2 is a proof that you actually maintained your controls consistently. And here's a doc versus reality moment. The official guidance make it super simple and straightforward. Define your controls, get audited, and done. In real world, most companies underestimate the effort required to define the roles and implement those roles. Your auditor wants evidence for every single thing, every access review, every policy change, and every incident response. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Now let's talk about why Azure being SOC 2 doesn't necessarily mean that you are SOC 2. And this is the part that matters the most. There's a concept called shared responsibility model. Microsoft is responsible for security of the cloud, and you are responsible for security in the cloud. 2 words, but massive difference. Microsoft handles patching all the data centers, the cooling, the power, and the uptime. They patch the hypervisor and make sure it's up to date. They maintain the network fabric. They manage the underlying compute, storage, and the networking infrastructure. All that is covered by Microsoft's SOC 2 report. But everything you build on top of that platform, that is yours. Your identity configuration in the Entra ID, your NSGs, your firewall rules, your encryption settings, your key vault policies, your RBAC access, your data classification, backup DR, your logging and monitoring. All of this is your responsibility, and this is what your auditor is going to focus on. And here's where the shared responsibility model lines get really interesting. It shifts depending on which service model you are using. If you are running virtual machine, that's IaaS. You are responsible for almost everything: operating system, patch management, updates, OS level settings. Microsoft just gives you the VM and the underlying infrastructure. If you are using services such as Azure SQL, database, or app services, that is PaaS, platform as a service. Microsoft handles more of the stack. They patch the operating system, they manage the infrastructure, and the runtime that comes with it. But you still own the access control, data classification, network isolation, and your application security. Well, if you're using more of a serverless settings like Azure Functions or Logic apps, Microsoft handles even more. But you are still responsible for your code, identity management, your data, and the monitoring. I've seen this trip up organizations thinking that PaaS is all handled by Microsoft. PaaS means Microsoft handles more of the infrastructure security, but the application security, network isolation, identity, and data protection, that is all on you. And here's something I learned over time working with different kind of organizations. The shared responsibility model is not just a Microsoft thing. It applies to AWS, GCP, or any other cloud vendor. If you're multi-cloud, you need to map out your responsibility across all of those vendors. You got a same SOC 2 framework, but different controls and different platform implementations. Alright, let me jump into the portal and show you specific tools that you need to configure to get SOC 2 and maintain that. Because Microsoft gives you a lot here. You just need to know where to go and what to look for. And most important, how to configure it. First up, Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. This is your starting point. It gives you a compliance score and a breakdown of every single control you need to address. You can filter specifically for SOC 2 and it shows you which controls are managed by Microsoft and which are managed by you and which is shared. Here's the pro tip. Don't just look at the scores. Click into individual improvement actions. Each one tells you exactly what to configure, link to documentation, and lets you trace your remediation status. When your auditor asks, how do you track compliance gaps? This is your answer. Second, Entra ID. This is where majority of your SOC 2 access control requirement lives. You need to demonstrate that you have multi-factor authentication enforced, that you have conditional access policy controlling who can access what, from where, that you're doing regular security review. I've seen this break in client environment where they've had MFA enabled but had not configured any conditional access to actually require it for admins. Third, Azure policy. This is how you enforce configuration standards at scale. Instead of hoping that every developer encrypts your storage account, you write a policy that prevents unencrypted storage accounts from being created. For SOC 2, you want a policy covering encryption at rest, encryption in transit, network isolation for sensitive resource, allowed region for data residency, required tag for resource classification, and diagnostic settings for logging. Microsoft provides built-in policy initiative for all of them. Use it as a starting point and customize them from there. Number 4, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. This is your cloud security assessment tool. It scans your environment, identifies misconfiguration, and gives you a security score with specific recommendation. And here's what I tell every client. Turn on the enhanced security feature for at least your production subscription. And number 5, logging and monitoring. SOC 2 requires that you can demonstrate who did what and when and exactly why. Azure Activity Log captures control plane operations. Diagnostic settings on individual resource captures the data plane activity. And here's the most important part people miss. You need to set a retention period that matches your audit window. If your auditor wants a 12-month of minimum evidence and your logs only go back 30 days, that's a problem. Alright, so you have got the tools configured. Now let me tell you what the auditor is going to focus on. Because a lot of people over-invest in technical controls and under-invest in the organization control. The auditor cares about 3 things. The technical control, the Azure configuration we just talked about. Second, the organization control. That's your policy, procedures, and the people. And finally, the third one, the evidence. That's the proof that your controls are working over time. On the organization side, you need documented proof of organization control, information security, access policy, change management, incident response plan, vendor management, and the business continuity plan. And I don't mean a Google Doc that somebody wrote 3 years ago and haven't read it again. You need a policy that is reviewed periodically, acknowledged, and changed as needed. You need an access review plan. Who reviews your access rights? How often does that happen? What happens when somebody leaves a company or change a role? If you're using Entra ID access reviews, which you should, you can show that to your auditor to give them an automated review summary. That is much stronger than saying that we review it manually every quarter. And then you need a change management plan. How do code changes get deployed to the production? Is there a PR process? Is there separation of duties? That means the person who writes the code isn't the same person who approves the PR and push to production. If you're using Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions, your pipeline and the approval process is your evidence. And then you need the incident response plan. What happens when something goes wrong? Who gets notified? What's the escalation path? How do you communicate to the affected customers? And most importantly, have you actually tested this? A documented incident plan that's never tested is a big red flag for the auditors. And here's something a lot of organizations skip, which is the security awareness training. Your auditor wants to see that every person in the company has been trained and made security aware. This is not only for engineering teams, it goes for HR, accounting, and every single department that belongs in the company. If they have access to the company system, they need the training. There's no questions asked. And most importantly, you need the records proving that they completed those trainings. Alright, let's talk about the timeline because there's not many people talking about how long it takes for you to get SOC 1 and SOC 2. SOC 2 Type 2 requires evidence over time. You cannot just implement controls today and expect to get audited tomorrow and get the certificate. Here's what the actual timeline looks like. Month 1 to month 3 is readiness assessment and the gap remediation. This is where you figure out what's missing and how to fix it. Implement those Azure security tools that I showed you. Write or update your policies that are already in place. Set up your logging and the retention policies. Configure any access reviews that you can. This phase takes longer than you expect. Month 4 to month 9 is the observation period. Your controls need to be operating effectively for at least 3 to 6 months before you book your audit. During this time, you need to be collecting evidence, making sure access control review are taking place on time, the systems are being patched based on desired SLA, the incident response plan is being followed, and the logs are being collected and stored securely as you need. Month 10 to month 12 is when you schedule the actual audit. The auditor comes in, examines your environment, reviews your evidence, talks to your team, and then finally writes the report. This typically takes about 4 to 8 weeks depending on the scope. So we are talking about minimum of 9 to 12 months from the day one to the day you actually get audited. And I tell this my client every single time on day one because I've seen this happen. It's very painful to wait for 9 to 12 months when you are closing a big deal with a clause that say that you will have the SOC 2 type 2 report. And then they go to somebody that does this stuff and you would have to explain how it's impossible to get that within 90 days. That's a conversation nobody wants to have. All right, here's the biggest mistake that I see because this is the one that costs the most time and the money. Number one is treating SOC 2 as a one-off project. Organizations go through this pain of getting the SOC 2 Type 2 report, which they celebrate, send it to their customers, and then they stop working on it. They stop doing the access review, they stop checking the logs, they stop reviewing the policies, they stop following the plans that they have built. And after 12 months, when it's time for renewal audit, they're basically starting from scratch again. SOC 2 is an annual thing. Your auditor comes to you every single year. And if your controls degrade since the last time, they will show up on the findings report. Your customer will see those findings. And in the industries such as finance and healthcare, findings on a SOC 2 can kill a deal. The organizations that do well build compliance into their operations. Access reviews are automated through Entra ID and run quarterly without anybody thinking about it. Azure policy enforcement is always up and running. Defender for Cloud is scanning daily and logs flow automatically. Training is part of onboarding. It's not a project. It's how you operate. And here's the hard part. First year is definitely the hardest. Once you've built the foundation, maintaining those is genuinely just the operational stuff. But only if you build this as a program from the start. Let me bring this together now. SOC 2 compliance in Azure is not automatic. Azure policy provides you the foundation, and honestly, it's really great foundation. Entra ID, Azure policy, Defender for Cloud, and logging infrastructure. Microsoft gives you the building blocks, but you are the one who have to assemble them correctly. Document everything and maintain it over time. The shared responsibility models mean Microsoft covers some part of it, which is mostly the infrastructure. You cover everything that you build on top of it, and you need your own independent audit to make sure you prove that everything works. If you are starting this journey, budget at least 9 to 12 months for this. Get your organization policies in place and treat it as an ongoing program, not just a one-off project. Let me know in the comments if you're going through SOC 2 compliance right now and what's been your biggest challenge. I would love to hear, and this is one of those topics where real experience matters more than the documentation. Alright, I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious and keep building.